On this week's brand new episode of my movie podcast, Load Bearing Beams, we do a very thorough deep dive into Raiders of the Lost Ark, one of the great action movies ever made. As with all episodes of our podcast, we devote a lot of time to covering the history of the movie, how it was developed, how it was produced, and who are the people primarily responsible for it and how it turned out. And what I've always heard that Steven Spielberg say about the Indiana Jones movies, and Raiders in particular, is what he says is, these are George Lucas's movies. I'm just the hired help. He always says I'm the hired help. Just there to point the camera. And I've always been annoyed at him saying this. Like, it sounds like incredible insincere false modesty, like he wants you to know how gracious he is in being willing to share the credit with George Lucas. But I have done it over the past 2 weeks. I'm in a great quicksand pit of history of the Indiana Jones franchise and its origins, and I do have to admit, I think I've never given George Lucas the proper amount of credit for these movies. So basically, once he finished the first Star Wars, he announced that he was retired from directing forever. He talked all the time back then about how he didn't like directing, and he also didn't like writing. He wanted to basically handle big picture stuff and just really focus on running his company, Lucasfilm. And he entered this very interesting period in the early 80s where back to back he produced The Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I would say those are the two best movies he's ever been involved in. And they had a very similar involvement and production. And in fact, much of the same crew worked on both movies. They were both produced primarily in London at Elstree Studio. But the way this worked with Raiders is this. He had the idea for Raiders of the Lost Ark in the early 70s, and he started to develop it with writer-director Philip Kaufman, and then put it aside, focused on Star Wars. Once Star Wars was done, he told Steven Spielberg about his idea for Raiders of the Lost Ark and asked Spielberg if Spielberg wanted to direct it. And Spielberg said, "Don't you want to direct it?" Lucas says, "Once again, I'm retired. I'm done with directing." So Spielberg and Lucas together hire Lawrence Kasdan to write the screenplay for the movie. And the three of them basically hole up in a conference room for 4 days, and they're just bouncing ideas off of each other. And George Lucas is clearly the leader here, the one who has the most ideas. This has all been living in his head after all. And then after this story conference, Lawrence Kasdan is tasked with turning it all into a coherent screenplay, which he does. And Lucas is actually so happy with him that he asks him to rewrite the script for Empire Strikes Back. Then, once Raiders enters production, it's clearly Spielberg's movie. He's the one running the set. He's the one in charge. And Lucas is there and he's helping, but he's hands off. He's deferential to Spielberg as the director of the movie. With Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark, George Lucas basically found this sort of ideal role that perfectly suited what he's great at. Basically, big picture ideas, makes good hires, trusts the people he hires to do good work. I've always wondered why, when he returned to directing in 1999 with The Phantom Menace, with the Star Wars prequels, why didn't he just do the same old approach he had done in the early 80s? Why didn't he hire writers and directors who he trusted? I mean, there's tons of theories that you can come up with as to why he didn't. But it's just a shame because, you know, what's not good about the Star Wars prequels is the writing and the directing, but there's still like cool ideas. There's still some of that George Lucas magic that sneaks through in some of the prequels, like the pod racing in episode 1. So I'm just saying it sucks that in basically the early 80s, George Lucas found the ideal role for himself, which was hands-off executive producer, insulate the filmmakers from the studio. He was very good at that. Creative control was very important to him, and just have big picture ideas and just kind of help with the technology. It's a shame that he didn't want to keep doing that role. If not with the Star Wars prequels, then with other movies. Just something interesting to think about sort of the road not taken for old George.